For over 15 years, Saturdays and Illegal Curve have been synonymous with one another. With insight, analysis, and interviews regarding the Winnipeg Jets, the Manitoba Moose, and all around the NHL, here are Dave Manouk, Ezra Ginsburg, and your host, Drew Mindell. The Illegal Curve Hockey Show, presented by Play Now, the official sports betting partner of the Winnipeg Jets, starts now.
Saturday morning, good morning, Winnipeg. Good morning, Manitoba. For all those joining us live this morning on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms, we say good morning, universe, and welcome to Red Day here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. I'm not sure that this is, we certainly didn't plan this, but both Ezzy and I decided we are feeling a little red in our choice of wardrobe for today's show. And I must say, Mr. Ginsburg, you look absolutely resplendent in that red shirt, and then the way that the Navy
you look pretty good
hat,
too, Drew.
Thank you. The way the Navy hat is playing off of it, it's a good look. We both look damn good. That's what I'm saying here.
We do.
We
do. We're very handsome.
That's true.
Dangerously handsome,
Dangerously,
if you will. Just don't write with the red pen. I hear that's bad luck.
Really? It's bad luck to write with a red pen?
Apparently.
Oh, I never heard that one before. That maybe all my teachers were cursing me with bad luck when they kept writing terrible, terrible, terrible on all of my school assignments back in the day.
You were a model student, Drew. I know that. Don't sell yourself short. I know you did. You were a exemplary student at Joseph Walensky.
I did have a teacher in grade 9 tell my parents that she thought I was a bit of a fascist. Which
What?
I thought was honestly, that was what she used in parent-teacher interviews. That was the terminology she used. I don't think she liked some of my opinions.
Let me tell you, Drew, there's a lot of things I've called you over the years. That's not one of them.
I know, it was odd, but anyways, I wish her well moving forward, wherever the hell she might be on this day and age.
Yeah,
not that important. We're here.
Probably not listening, but
it's unlikely that she's listening. I'll be honest.
Maybe she's a big fan. Maybe she like she's been following you, and eventually she's going to apologize for calling you a fascist.
Maybe she's going to be like, I regret the terminology I used in labeling you, this 14-year-old kid, a fascist. That was inappropriate of me in my role as an educator. I'm not sure. Maybe one day there will be a mea culpa coming at some point in time. But until that day, I'm not going to spend much time worrying about it at this point. In any event, here for the next couple of hours, big show ahead, lots of Jets talk, trade deadline in the rear view mirror. So we don't need to worry about who the Jets are acquiring. We now focus on who the Jets acquired, who they didn't acquire, who the teams around them acquired. Things of that nature. We are now fully into the stretch drive for the remainder of the regular season and into the playoffs. And the Winnipeg Jets, of course, took care of their business last night with a very tidy 6-1 victory over the New Jersey Devils, really taking it to the Devils and reminding everybody, as we talked about last night on the post-game show, reminding everybody that the best team in the league, the mantle for best team in the league, at least so far this year, does go through us here in Peg City, no matter what all the other teams around may have done. And, it's in that vein, Ezzy, that I want to start, because I know the consternation, and I'm reading it online, and I know that all these teams are now awarding the Dallas Stars the Stanley Cup, and they're saying the Stars are a better team than the Jets. And I know that everyone's saying the Colorado Avalanche are now a better team than the Winnipeg Jets. And I have time for those arguments. But at the same time, I want to remind everybody, or I want to just caution everybody, to tap the brakes just a little bit. Because just because you get these acquisitions, it doesn't mean that the fit for these players or that their acclimatization to their new teams is seamless and immediate. Sometimes it works out that way, Paul Stastny coming to the Winnipeg Jets. But just as often, there is a learning curve for a lot of these teams in bringing their new players into the fold. So while I have no doubts that beyond this year, the Dallas Stars are an incredibly good team with Mikko Rantanen on their roster, and that the Colorado Avalanche are a very good team with the moves that they've made, yesterday, and throughout this season. Obviously getting Necas for Rantanen now looks better, getting Brock Nelson. We know all the moves that the Avalanche have made. But with that in mind, there's no guarantee that those moves are effective immediately and difference-making moves for the rest of the 2025 season, would be my comment and cautionary tale to all those who are upset, concerned, thinking that the balance of power has immediately shifted with the moves that were made yesterday.
It's just naive to say that, to think that making a couple of moves instantly makes those two teams better than the Jets, right? That's what you're trying to say, Drew. And if you want to look at, a team who looked like they were going to be much better just based on their acquisitions in the offseason, look no further than the Nashville Predators, right? Like bringing in Steven Stamkos, Jonathan Marchessault, Brady Shea. Nashville's not a playoff team this year. Not only are they not a playoff team, they're well out of a playoff spot, right? Yeah. So obviously,
in the league is what you would call them.
Well, yeah, and obviously, Mikko Rantanen is a notch above, all due respect to Stamkos and Marchessault. These are the guys that are in the back nine of their careers, whereas Rantanen's in his prime. But a few things on Rantanen, like he's a top 10, arguably top 5 forward in the NHL offensively. They had to give up first round draft picks and Logan Stankoven. Logan Stankoven is one of the best young players in the league, right? He's having some people thought his numbers would be a little bit better this year, but this is a guy who's only 22 years old, second round pick. And this is a guy who, by all accounts should be kind of like a 70 to 80 point guy in the NHL. So they did have to give up quite a bit to get Rantanen, and they obviously signed him. In terms of Colorado, obviously, that one I think bothered Jets fans more because Jets, obviously, we believe, Chevy hasn't admitted this publicly, but we believe the Jets were in on Brock Nelson, and then for Colorado to go and then trade for him, now the Jets have to possibly face him in the playoffs, right? Obviously, that would be more the second round than the first round, right? Depending on what happens. But, there's no doubt, guys, that, Dallas and Colorado, I don't know why I'm saying guys, it's just me and you, but I guess I'm referring to the chat as well, Drew. But, yes. There's no doubt that Colorado and Dallas made the biggest splashes. Now, if you want to go and spend some time on the Jets acquisitions, I think it's hard to look at those trades in a vacuum as opposed to comparing them to what Dallas and Colorado did. And I think that's why, if Dallas and Colorado had made similar moves, then I think we would just be taking the Jets moves at face value and saying, okay, Luke Schenn, good depth defenseman. He obviously has the Stanley Cups. He can block shots. He's physical. Okay, Brandon Tanev, he's a guy that's obviously familiar to the Jets organization, good energy player, can contribute a little bit of offense on your fourth line. Okay, those were some pretty good moves. Maybe a tad underwhelming, but certainly not bad. It made your team better. You address some weaknesses, right? Guys that can help you out on the penalty kill as well, right? So I think it's because of the fact that Colorado and Dallas made these big splashes that, Tanev and Schenn look a little bit underwhelming. But, I think, I still think there was an opportunity missed. Don't get me wrong, Drew. I think there was an opportunity missed to augment the 2C role. All due respect to Vladislav Nemesnikov. He's not a top 2 center in the NHL. He's not one of the better 2 centers in the NHL, mainly not because of, lack of skill or anything like that. He just doesn't have the offensive upside. So I would have liked the Jets to bring in a Jared McCann, for example. I'd be curious to know if the Jets were, talking to the Ron Francis and the Kraken about him, or, there's, Ryan O'Reilly's out there. Obviously Scott Lawton was another guy who apparently the Jets were interested in. He went to Toronto, of course. So I do think there was a little bit of an opportunity miss. Sorry, I'm giving you a very long-winded answer here.
That's Drew, okay. Keep going.
I think that, I like the moves in a vacuum. I really do. But when you consider what the Avalanche and the Stars have done, and also, most likely, if the Jets do get to the West Final, you're going up against a Vegas or an Edmonton. Right. These teams are stacked teams, and that I'm not worried. I think the Jets get through the first round easy. I really do. I think the Jets are getting to the second round, unless obviously things go horribly wrong. But the Jets this year have a good enough team that they should easily get through their first round opponent. It's when you face a team like Dallas and their strength up the middle that I worry about, the Jets maybe not having augmented that position.
Look, I agree that I agree with what you said about the first round. As long as the Jets maintain where they are, and we certainly didn't see any signs of a dip last night against New Jersey or Thursday night against the Philadelphia Flyers. It's hard to expect all of a sudden the Jets are going to collapse, even though that they were not a big winner at the trade deadline for the remainder of the regular season. It seems like they're still in a pretty good spot. We know where they are. Look, if you have they play Dallas twice yet this season. You split those games, you're still going to be in a pretty good position, I would say, and I think most people would likely agree with me on that front. But I wonder, it's funny you mentioned Vegas, because I agree that it seems more than likely that the team that's going to come out of the other division, the Pacific Division, is likely to be the Golden Knights in my mind. I know that Edmonton is dangerous.
You can never discount Edmonton, though, Drew.
You can never discount them when you have Draisaitl and McDavid, no question. But Vegas is not. Edmonton, they got the goaltending questions. They have questions. Vegas seems like a more well-rounded team than the Edmonton Oilers do at this point in time. I mean, it's interesting. The Oilers have played 62 games. Without looking, how many of those 62 games that the Oilers have played, how many do you think they've won in regulation time?
Without looking, I'm going to say 27.
26 is the answer.
Okay,
so
not bad.
Not bad. Pretty good. So
but that's also not very good.
That's not very good for Edmonton.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
They've won 10 games in overtime or the shootout, which is such a bit of an asterisk next to it that, truthfully, 5-on-5, they're not winning that many games compared to some of the other, quote unquote, elite teams in the league. If you talk about the teams that have won in regulation the most, it's the Jets and Vegas, 1-2, 36-35. So let's assume Vegas is the team out of the Pacific Division for conversation's sake. What did Vegas do at the trade deadline? They acquired Riley Smith, a guy they're familiar with.
Yeah.
The Jets.
I mean, you could see that coming from very far away. They love Riley Smith.
But Vegas, everyone expects Vegas to always make a massive move, to always.
Well, you were thinking Brad Marchand might be going to the Golden Knights.
I thought of the possibility. I mean,
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, Florida makes as much sense as well. It's a lot easier to stay in the East, everything else. But Vegas didn't make a massive move, and I don't necessarily feel the same level of consternation coming from their fan base over the lack of moves because Vegas isn't a headline grabbing team on this morning after the trade deadline.
I would agree with that. And the thing that popped into my mind with Vegas, it's funny because obviously, Drew, throughout the course of the show, we're going to sprinkle in a little Jets Carolina preview, but we're mainly focused on the trade deadline here. But there's other teams that didn't make moves that surprised me. Like you look at the Montreal Canadiens, and apparently the Montreal Canadiens didn't make those moves. Obviously, Drew, I'm not comparing the Canadiens to the Golden Knights. I'm just saying there were other teams that you thought, okay, the for sale sign is up. There's going to be a bunch of different moves happening here, and there wasn't. The Golden Knights, what I was going to say is obviously, well, not obviously, but it looks like Shea Theodore's injury isn't as bad, because what I was thinking is they were going to bring in a defenseman, because obviously Shea Theodore got injured during the Four Nations, right? Mm-hmm. And then they had to bring in Thomas Harley, of course. But I was expecting maybe Vegas to bring in a defenseman. Like there were some defensemen out there. Like there was names out there. Like obviously Mario Ferraro didn't move. Right. Jamie Oleksiak didn't move. Those were guys that we thought could be targets for the Jets. Mm-hmm. And so maybe I thought, maybe the Golden Knights will pick up one of those guys. Brian Dumoulin was obviously acquired by the Devils. We thought he could be an option for the Jets. But I think your point is, Drew, the Golden Knights, who seem to always have a trick up their sleeve, or sleeves, I should say, didn't really do much yesterday. But that Golden Knights team, I mean, like, again, speaking about up the middle, that's why, if we were to go team by team, I mean, Jack Eichel, I mean, Brett Howden, Thomas Hertl, like, that's what I'm talking about. Like, center depth for the Jets just isn't at that same level. Like, again, I think Vlad Namestnikov is a great hockey player. Mentioned this before. We've had him on the show. Super good guy. Just signed the 2-year contract extension, and he deserves it. I mean, this is a guy, a veteran who deserves to get that contract from the Jets. I'm just saying that, when you compare it to kind of the creme de la creme of the West, mm-hmm. It's just not quite up there. With Dallas, for example, who have Rupe Hintz, they have Wyatt Johnston, they have Matt Duchene up the middle. Again, I'm not saying that the Jets can't beat the Stars. So everybody don't absolutely torch me in the chat. I think that the Jets have a very good chance to go to the conference finals this year and possibly beyond. I'm just saying, when it comes to center depth, just isolating the center position, I'm just saying that I think, there was some room for the Jets to make improvements there.
I agree. I agree. If you look at all the top teams in the Western Conference and you compare their center depth, 1 through 4, the Jets are certainly towards the bottom, if not at the bottom of those top teams in the West. And by the top teams in the West, I'm talking about the teams that aren't in the top 3 teams in each division. If you're in a wild card spot, I'm not really considering you there. I mean, I'll listen to an argument about the Minnesota Wild, but not really. I mean, the Wild are a nice story. They've been, they're going to be a playoff team again, which is pretty impressive given their salary cap trouble that they've been in for all these last number of years after buying out Ryan Suter and buying out Zach Parise and those contracts sitting on their books still. So good for the Wild, but I don't consider them part of the elite conversation. The Jets' center depth, to your point, is towards the bottom of that roster. But whatever the sum of the Winnipeg Jets is more than the whole of its parts.
Right.
I think we've seen that all season long. And just because other teams go and make acquisitions, that doesn't necessarily change immediately. That doesn't necessarily mean immediately that Colorado, which has really significantly turned over a lot of their middle 6 of their roster, and Marty Neck and Natchez, Brock Nelson, Charlie Coyle. There's no guarantee that these guys immediately become seamless fits. Frankly, Mikko Rantanen did not seamlessly and immediately fit with the Carolina Hurricanes.
Right.
Natchez has actually fit better with Colorado than Rantanen did in Carolina. Now we know Rantanen's not there anymore for reasons that we can discuss throughout the course of the program. It's not immediate. Just because you win on paper doesn't mean that it immediately translates. We've seen it here in Winnipeg. Kevin Hayes, people were excited about that acquisition.
The Kevin Hayes era, Drew, was a short one.
It didn't work. Did it work? Did it not work because of Kevin Hayes? Did it not work because of the deployment by Paul Maurice? Did it not work just because he changed the chemistry in the dressing room? Whatever the reason is, it didn't work. There's plenty of tales of teams winning the trade deadline, but ultimately losing come playoff time.
Chris Pronger said this. Again. I'm not sure if you saw Chris Pronger's tweet yesterday, obviously Hall of Fame defenseman. He said, at the end of the day, one team wins the Stanley Cup, right? To your point, Drew. So all of these moves, like one of Colorado or Dallas is going to be extremely disappointed in how this season ends, right? Yeah. And they made huge moves. Like the price that they paid for Brock Nelson is a hefty price. Cal Ritchie, I mean, remember Cal Ritchie played a little bit. I think he might have been in one of the games versus the Jets, if I'm not mistaken, but he's a 20-year-old first-round draft pick. I mean, this is a guy who has put up huge numbers in the Ontario Hockey League, and he's played 7 games this year for the Avalanche. So Cal Ritchie is a top prospect in the Colorado system. Yeah. They had to give up that plus a first-round pick to get a rental.
They gave up more than the Dallas Stars gave up for well, maybe not, but I mean, it's comparable. I mean, if you look at
it's a big price because it's a rental, right? There's no guarantee that, I mean, look, Brock Nelson could sign with the Colorado Avalanche. He could also sign with the Utah Hockey Club, or he could sign with the Jets. He could sign with anybody. He's a UFA, right? So when you're talking, like, I'd have to go back and compare, but it seemed like, and this is, Frank Saravalli, Darren Dreger, Pierre LeBrun, all the insiders were calling this a seller's market. And I think that's evidenced in the price that some of these teams had to pay for rentals, right? Like obviously Mikko Rantanen's not a rental, but like even what the Jets had to pay for
until they got him under contract.
Well, sure, but even the price that the Jets had to pay for Luke Schenn, right? Like it's a 2026 second rounder and a 2027 fourth rounder. But I mean, these are and look, you can always get these picks back. Like I was actually thinking, and I don't know if I'm the first one to put this out there. I was thinking, do you get that draft pick back maybe if Nikolai Ehlers' rights are traded?
Yeah, maybe.
I'm just saying you can get that draft pick back.
Not the specific pick, but a similar round pick is what.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, look, it happened with Jake Gensel, right? I'm just saying. I mean, I think I'm just floating it out there that if Nick Ehlers isn't signing with the Jets, maybe they get a draft pick back from a team so that they can get ahead of the other teams to sign him. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and that's a valid comment you make, and obviously time will tell on that front. And the Nikolai Ehlers question is certainly one that will be an off-season topic of conversation, barring something unforeseen. Barring a signing. There's nothing precluding the Winnipeg Jets from going out and signing one of their pending UFAs or pending RFAs between now and season's end. Where we've seen it happen before. It could very well happen again. Time will tell on that front. Just my overarching point is that, maybe just everybody tap the brakes a little bit, let it play out. We don't know. That's true, is we just don't know what's going to happen. Yes, it looks great for Dallas, theoretically. Yes, it looks good for Colorado, theoretically. The Jets, we know that as currently constructed, they're a damn good hockey team. That hasn't changed. If anything, they're a better hockey team than they were at 12 noon yesterday or at 10 a.m. yesterday. They've improved in areas. Have they improved in all the areas? No, they haven't. We know that. But they've improved. They've acquired.
It's not for lack of trying either, right? Kenny Weeb mentioned this yesterday. He said that the Jets had an offer in for Brock Nelson. Now, we don't know if that offer better or worse than the offer that they got from Colorado. Well, it probably wasn't better because New York would have taken it if it was better. But let's not forget that Chevy was out there trying to acquire a 2C, right? We mentioned, I realize Scott Laughton is a polarizing name. Look, whether Scott Laughton is a 2C or a 3C, I think we get fixated on the reality is Laughton would have improved your center depth, period, full stop. So Laughton is a guy whose name was out there that we believe the Jets were interested in at the very least, right? So to your point, Drew, no, the Jets didn't improve the second line center. Well, it's Vlad Nemesnikov's time then, right? Now, last year they brought in Sean Monahan. Now, with that new contract that Nemesnikov has, he's now got the security in knowing that he's got that position locked up. And as far as people that are concerned about the depth, I'll mention this again. Ideally, Adam Lowry's not your second line center, even though he's been used in terms of minutes like a second line center. Look at that short sample size that Lowry played with Iafallo and Ehlers. Yeah. That line had very good underlying numbers. And again, I'm not saying, that Adam Lowry is better than Brock Nelson. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that the Jets do have players in their lineup. If there is, God forbid, an injury, like a lot of people in the chat yesterday after the postgame show were saying, bubble wrap 55, get Scheifele bubble wrapped.
That's true for every team in the league, though.
That's what I'm
saying. Nathan McKinnon goes down in Colorado,
exactly.
they're screwed. If Connor McDavid goes down in Edmonton, you got Leon Draisaitl, but still, ultimately, you're screwed. You can't always have a contingency for when if a superstar gets injured. New Jersey, we saw them last night. Jack Hughes goes down with an injury. Well,
that's a perfect example.
Yeah. And what happened is they got screwed. And that's dems the breaks, unfortunately, sometimes in professional sports. When Tom Brady tore his ACL as a member of the New England Patriots on the third play of the season, however many years ago, well, the Patriots were screwed for that year. You can't prepare every single contingency because there aren't, in case of glass break emergency for superstar players. That's why they're superstars. If they were average, they would have that. They'd have that problem. When Rasmus Kupari goes out with a concussion, he's replaceable. No offense. He's been great for the Jets, but there's guys who can come in and backfill that position, be it Morgan Barron playing center last night, be it David Gustafsson, be it with the acquisition of Brandon Tanev.
Well, can we talk about that fourth line a little bit? Because I know we talked about it a little bit last night. I really like the look of that fourth line, right? On a lot of teams around the NHL, that's a team's third line, right? That's how good that fourth line can be. And, just quickly on the Brandon Tanev acquisition, I'm not going to do my Brandon Tanev face like I did.
Oh, people! You did it again. The people demanded it. They wanted it again.
Only Brandon Tanev can do Tanev face.
That's true.
This acquisition and what did you give up? You gave up basically nothing to get him.
Giving up draft picks is nothing. Look, again, people put.
What was it? A 2027 fourth rounder?
No, a second and a fourth, or a second rounder for Tanev.
But it was 2027.
It was a draft pick that's a long ways off. That
Right.
When it comes time for the Jets to have theoretically been making that pick, people will not have remembered that it was their pick initially.
Yeah. So hold on. Let me see here. It was it was a 2027 second round pick.
Yeah.
So I mean,
long ways off.
That is a fine price to look. At the end of the day, Drew, the Jets still have their first round pick and they have $6 million of cap space. And I just want to throw that out there as well. A lot of people were saying, commenting that, the Jets didn't use their $6 million of cap space.
Yeah.
Did we expect the Jets to use all of their cap space? I certainly didn't. And when the cap's going up, by the way, what is it going up to 95 million or whatever it's going up to? Don't expect the Jets to necessarily spend every single one of those dollars. The Jets are not necessarily going to be a team that spends up to the cap every year.
Well, I think that was the part what people were a little bit upset about is you're banking all this cap space this year and you then don't use it. It's not like it rolls over to next year, but you don't spend this year. It's not a bank account in that sense. So I think people thought, look, you have all this space, maybe even be a broker. If you got the space, be a third-party broker, even if it's that simple, and gain a pick that way if you're not going to use it. I understand why the Jets weren't prepared to be a broker before the trade deadline because they thought they were going to need to use that cap space. But I think, that is a bit of a bullet left in the chamber that the Jets didn't use come trade deadline.
But who were they using it on, right? Like,
well, had they been able to acquire Brock Nelson, had they been able to acquire,
right. They didn't, right? And that's the point. Like they obviously that cap space would have been there. They wouldn't have to use all of it for Brock Nelson, but obviously, some of it would have been used. But I just don't necessarily know that. I guess I just don't see that. I don't have as big of an issue with it because I don't ever think that the plan was necessarily to use all of it. It was to use some of it. But I think the point is that, the Jets are going into the playoffs with Vladislav Namestnikov as the 2C. That we know now. And I'm not as disappointed maybe as I thought I would be, more so because that line has clicked really well, right? Cole Perfetti obviously scored another goal. He's on that line with Ehlers. Look, at the end of the day, Drew, what's going to determine whether this was a successful trade deadline or not is how far the Jets go in the playoffs.
Yeah.
If the Jets go to the conference finals or, let's dream big. If they win the Stanley Cup, then I don't think anybody's going to care that the Jets didn't get Brock Nelson at the trade deadline. If Colorado beats the Jets in the second round and they go on to win the Cup, then yes, it's going to be a very depressing summer.
You're absolutely right about that. We'll play it out and see where it goes. Where we're going is to commercial, and on the other side, Kelly Moore from 680 CJOB is going to be our guest here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. And still to come this morning, in about an hour's time, our good friend Craig Button is going to join us as well. Saturday morning, Drew Mandel, Ezra Ginsburg, all of you, the Illegal Curve Hockey Show presented by Play Now. Don't go anywhere. Bottom of the hour, welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mandel, Ezra Ginsburg with you on this Saturday morning. We remind you tomorrow the Jets are going to be in Carolina. It's a 4 o'clock Central Time puck drop, which means our good friends at CJOB will have coverage starting at what time, Kelly Moore?
At 2 o'clock. Can I give a shameless plug for the Mid-Canada Fasteners and Tools pregame show?
Absolutely.
Shameless plugs is what we do here best on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
I have a bunch of shameless plugs in here somewhere.
Yeah, I was considering that, and the doctor said it's too late. You can't even go there anymore.
Well, Drew, I was going to say, if Kelly will play something on that beautiful grand piano behind him, maybe we'll allow him to plug the pregame show again.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that would be lovely. That's in any event, Kelly, good morning. Thank you for joining us. How are things?
Great. Thanks for having me on, fellas. As you can see by this side of my face, it is a beautiful sunny Saturday morning. So
there you go. It is nice and bright out there. So yes, spring is sprung and the trade deadline is in the rearview mirror, which means the playoff season is rapidly approaching. And the Winnipeg Jets certainly, I think, reminded everybody last night to just tap the brakes a little bit. They're still the kings of the castle as it pertains to the NHL and the standings, and going into New Jersey, playing a banged up New Jersey Devils team, but a Devils team that is in a playoff spot currently. The Jets, I believe, made a statement to everybody just to, as Aaron Rodgers once said, RELAX, relax.
Yeah, and it is such an emotional roller coaster for fans on the NHL trading deadline day, because you see what's going on around the rest of the division. And Scott Arniel said it before the game last night. The arms race is on in the Central Division. And man, you look at what this division is doing right now, between how good Winnipeg has been right since day one. Certainly the Dallas Stars did what they needed to do, as did the Colorado Avalanche to bridge the gap. The Minnesota Wild, they're going to be a pesky team. Don't count out the St. Louis Blues yet. So there are a few divisions that you can look and say, okay, there are five miserable teams to play against, like they have in the Central. And I'm sure you guys said this as well, because I know Scott Arniel's been banging the drum on this pretty much ever since training camp. The Jets need to win this division, and now more than ever, because I think that Colorado, with their strengthened lineup, and they've been able to get through the inconsistency and the injuries that plagued them earlier in the year, they're going to reel in Minnesota. I don't know that there's enough time for them to surpass Dallas. But in a perfect world for Jets Nation, Winnipeg finishes first, and Colorado and Dallas beat each other's brains out in the first round.
To your point, they reeled in Minnesota last night. They're
Yes.
tied with Minnesota, but they have the tiebreaker by virtue of 3 more regulation wins.
Right.
So they are certainly in the driver's seat to finish in that, likely in that third spot in the Central Division over the Minnesota Wild.
Yeah, and I mean, right now Jets fans are saying, let's just stop the season right here.
Freeze.
Let's make it 64 games long, and let's go now. But you know what? If the Winnipeg Jets play the way that they do, they can compete with Dallas, and they can compete with Colorado. And I don't know about you guys. I know we're not supposed to look ahead other than the next game, but I cannot wait for Friday night.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, that's going to be a matchup. It's must see TV, as they used to say back in the day. That is absolute must see TV if you are a hockey fan. And obviously, Kelly, let's focus on the players that the Jets did acquire, because obviously, Brock Nelson, everybody had him circled, and there was the Jets fans had him in their crosshairs. And shout out to you guys. You guys did an excellent job. I was listening in my car. And at work. Don't tell Peter Woods at Hockey Manitoba.
Okay.
But you guys did an awesome job yesterday. Obviously, Jim, Cameron, Christian, the whole CJOB crew, you guys did an amazing job. Wanted to get that in there. But obviously, Brandon Tanev and Luke Schenn, 2 guys that come with the playoff pedigree. Obviously, now the Jets have some Stanley Cup experience on the back end. I like these moves mainly because they fill holes, and they just make the Jets a harder team to play against in the playoffs.
Yeah, I do a weekly commentary on Monday, second shameless plug. And one of the things I felt strongly about was the difference between the Winnipeg Jets this year. And this isn't rocket science. I'm sure you guys have been talking about it as anybody covering this team. But the difference for the Jets this year at the trading deadline compared to a year ago were a healthy Gabriel Vilardi, who is absolutely flourishing on that number 1 line, and a far more complete version of Cole Perfetti.
Yep.
The Jets didn't have either of those components last year at the deadline, which is why they needed to go and get Sean Monahan, and they needed to go and get Tyler Toffoli, because you might remember Vilardi's injury knocked him out for the entire month of March, basically. And so the Jets didn't know how he would be coming out of that injury. So they had to bridge that gap. And Cole Perfetti was just not being able to get back to the form that he showed in the first half. So that's why they had to, go out and get a Sean Monahan, because they didn't like what they were seeing in the middle. This year, it's a totally different story. So had they been able to get a Brock Nelson, it would have been a luxury. It would have been a great fill, but I don't know that it was a necessity. And so to me, the big priority was the blue line. And I don't think that you look at Luke Schenn as a top 4 defenseman. And if I'm going to be nitpicky, I would say the only thing I would have liked to have seen was that the Jets were able to get a defenseman who could fit comfortably into a third pair role, but also be elevated to top 4 if needed. And boy, we saw that on Long Island on Tuesday night without Dylan Samberg. Logan Stanley has made great strides, but he's not close to being there yet. I think he's perfectly suited for a third pair role, and I'm interested to see if it's him and Luke Schenn when the team gets back home from this road trip that make up the third pair, or if it's Hayden Fleury who slots in there to give them a little more mobility, with Schenn more of a physical, rugged, stay-at-home type guy, which is why Logan Stanley, I think, has been playing as much as he has. But the other part of this, guys, and I think you could hear it in the voices of the players on the post-game show. Sometimes you can tell whether, they're just saying it because it's the right thing to do. It's the company line.
Mm-hmm.
Adam Lowry and Josh Morrissey, who are part of the heartbeat of this hockey club, were genuinely enthusiastic about the additions that were made. You didn't get any sense whatsoever that the Jets were disappointed that, Rantanen wound up in Dallas or that Brock Nelson wound up in Colorado. Would they have liked to have had those guys? Yeah, but they're comfortable with what they have in this dressing room, and they saw where the Jets address some needs, especially with the addition of Luke Schenn. And I have to be completely transparent with you guys. I wasn't quite sure what the rationale was for Brandon Tanev, but after watching that game last night in Jersey,
Yeah.
became crystal clear. The Jets looked a little rusty out there, and I say that only in a complimentary fashion.
Rusty being Tanev's nickname,
Yeah.
of course, for anybody in our audience who didn't pick up that
Thank
play
you.
on words from Kelly Moore of 680 CJOB.
Drew always has my back.
I got your back all the time, Kelly. You betcha, buddy. To your point there about, the post-game comments from Lowry and the post-game comments from Morrissey and even from Tanev himself.
Right.
I think that this Jets team is, again, as they've been, even though they're atop the league, they've been doubted.
Yeah.
Everyone's waiting, or maybe not in Winnipeg so much anymore, but outside of Winnipeg, everyone's yes, but. And I think it's the yes, but, the word but there, that the players are going to use as a galvanizing force. Yes, you got Brandon Tanev. Yes, you got Luke Schenn. But what did Dallas do? But what did Colorado do? Well, anytime the Jets have been presented with a but this year, they've gone ahead and they've kicked that but, 2 T's instead of the 1 T in this play of words.
However, and I think the whether they're nagging concerns or whether they're smaller concerns, the Winnipeg Jets are still in the prove me mode.
Mm-hmm.
I think from the aspect of this is a hockey club with a core group that is 0-10 when coming off a playoff loss. They have not been able to absorb a setback in the postseason in a positive fashion for 10 straight games. So and I think when they slay that dragon this spring, then I think a lot of the question marks will be removed for people because that's what's holding this team back, I think, from being legitimately respected to the degree that they should be for what they have accomplished during the regular season because of the failures of postseasons past. But this just and I want to temper my words here because I thought last year the team had that as well. Mm-hmm. And then look what happened. But they just seem more deeper, more complete. And the other byproduct, guys, too, of the Brandon Tanev trade, we discussed this on the pregame show yesterday. What were they going to do to fit Tanev in? Was Morgan Barron going to come out of the lineup? And I don't want to say argued, but I discussed with our panel that, from Barron's perspective, the night before he'd had a real good game, team high 6 shots. He was just coming off of an injury, so had been out of the lineup for a while. And he's a setter. And you guys have heard, Morgan every once in a while makes those subtle reminders that,
that's up the middle.
That's my position.
Yeah.
He's never made a big deal out of being on the left side of that fourth line or the left side of the Lowry line. When he usually comes in after the second power play unit to replace Nino Niederreiter for the next shift after. But he likes to play in the middle. And holy smokers, guys, like that, to me, that was one of the storylines from that 6-1 win over New Jersey last night. Morgan Barron looked really good in that fourth line center slot. And now all of a sudden you look, Mark Scheifele 6'3", Adam Lowry 6'5". Yes, Vlad Nemesnikov is a little on the undersized side, but then you've got Morgan Barron 6'4". That's some pretty good size and some pretty good skaters and more importantly, guys who like to play playoff hockey down the middle for you now.
Protect the middle, those guys can.
Protect the cut of the ice.
Yes, exactly right. You talk about the 10 straight losses after come playoffs, after you find it, they lost.
After they've lost, they have lost 10 in a row. Yeah.
Right. Luke Schenn's acquisition, I think,
yes,
with the pedigree of the Stanley Cups, is I think that acquisition will help the team in sort of calm themselves, because to your point about slaying that dragon, they haven't been able to do it. But Luke Schenn has been through up and down through every battle imaginable in this league. He's lifted the cup on a couple different occasions. His presence, when he sees his dressing room mates getting a little tighter, getting maybe gripping their sticks a little bit tighter than they need to, I think his presence there will calm the waters and calm the nerves and maybe give the Jets some peace of mind in their quest to slay that dragon.
Well, as you guys well know, the Schenn family is about as respected a family as there is in the National Hockey League.
It's a good Saskatchewan family right there, Kelly.
Yeah, okay. There's another shameless plug. but you're right, Ezzy. And so Luke Schenn, from all the things you just described, Drew, but also from come into a dressing room that has a certain culture, he fits like a glove. And I think that's the other aspect of the trades that the Jets made, is that the dressing room doesn't get disrupted one iota. Draft picks were shipped out to acquire these players. Nobody has had to leave, and so there's that bit of an emotional baggage to have to handle. But yeah, Luke Schenn, I think. And again, we're not trying to make him out to be the second coming of Bobby Orr here, but he fits some needs for the Winnipeg Jets. He is miserable to play against.
Yep.
And so that net front protection, I think, is absolutely a necessity come the playoffs. Anybody who followed this hockey club last year still has visions of Valeri Nichushkin and Ross Colton and some of the other guys on the Colorado Avalanche being immovable pieces in front of Connor Hellebuck. And so I think that's one area where Schenn will help. Like Brandon Tanev, Schenn will also help on the penalty kill. And that's, you look across the board and the Jets excel in a lot of departments, but penalty kill is one area where they're somewhat average, mostly because of the first half of the season. Over the third quarter, they've been well over 80% on the penalty kill, so it looks like they have that figured out. But Tanev and Schenn are only going to help them there. And then, of course, you have to have depth on defense. The Jets are up to 9 now that I think, they could count on it to various degrees. Fleury was able to play top 4 minutes for them. I know the analytics don't smile brightly on him, but I'm an eye test guy, even though sometimes it's in failure mode. But I didn't think that Hayden Fleury was a complete failure when he had to fill in for Dylan Samberg. But so you've got him. You do have Logan Stanley if they decide to go in a different direction. Colin Miller is certainly battle-tested with some of his previous stops, be it in Dallas or Vegas. And then I think, the dark horse in all of this, and I haven't had a chance to see him play, but I rely on Icy Dave.
I know where you're going here.
He's not here. We don't have to talk about him. It's okay.
And I think, when the Moose season is done, Elias Solomonson is a guy that is going to be brought up just to experience the what the Stanley Cup run is all about, and he's earned that. With a good first North American pro season with the Manitoba Moose. So that gives you your 10 deep on defense. And I think certainly when you look at this team with the way that they're set up on forward, you can't, no team, even Dallas and Colorado, what they've done, you can't have 8 or 9 guys that are all top 6 capable, in terms of being highly productive players. But in the NHL, in the playoffs rather, it becomes a totally different game. So the Jets do have people that can play playoff style hockey if injuries dictate they have to elevate. And I'm thinking along the lines of a Nito Niederreiter. I'm thinking along the lines of an Alex Iafallo, and I think to a certain degree Brandon Tanev. And then you've got the guys like the Gustafsons, like the Kaparis, and even further down, Dominic Toninato, Axel Jonsson, Fialbi, Jared Anderson, Dolan. There's a good base here if you have to push up, because at some point you're going to need to do that. But just like most teams in the NHL, if you suffer an injury or injuries to the degree that a team like the New Jersey Devils have, it's going to be really difficult. Yeah.
Kelly, I wanted to ask you about Nick Ehlers, right? Because obviously the Jets are a playoff team this year. As I mentioned on last night's postgame show, we're on clinch watch because the Jets are getting close. Not necessarily, if they beat Carolina, are they going to clinch a playoff spot? But in the next, week to 2 weeks, I think the Jets are going to be, close to clinching a playoff spot. But everybody's obviously focused on the playoffs. There's obviously unfinished business.
Yes.
What happened last year with Colorado. And the reason why I bring up Nick Ehlers is because obviously last night he had the goal and two assists. He was fantastic. We talked about that beautiful slap shot pass on the Josh Morrissey goal, which was a really clever play by a really skilled player. But I mean, I'm watching Ehlers kind of a little bit closer than some players heading into the playoffs, because obviously this is a guy who's been criticized often, let's be honest, for how he's played in the playoffs. But just what are you seeing from Ehlers? Because, this hasn't been maybe as big of a narrative going into the trade deadline, because, you look at Brock Nelson or you look at some of the other pending UFAs, it's been clear that Nikolai Ehlers wasn't going to be traded. But it's also clear that we have no idea if he's going to stick around a little bit. So just what's kind of your overall assessment of that situation? Because a lot of Jets fans here are obviously hoping that, if the Jets go on a long playoff run and potentially win a cup, Ehlers is going to stick around after this season.
Yeah, well, that is to be determined. The one thing I would say is you only have so many long-term contracts, even with the increasing salary cap, because of the fear, I think, of aging out to a certain degree. You only have so many of those slots that I think most teams want to fill. They've dedicated 2 of those slots clearly to Connor Hellebuck and Mark Scheifele. I would think, I can't see it not happening, that when the contracts expire, the same thing will happen for Kyle Connor and for Josh Morrissey. That Gabriel Velarde and Dylan Samberg are going to get extensions. So how much room at the end is there? And I think this is going to be a huge, huge spring for Nikolai Ehlers, both from a personal point of view, but also for the team, because that's one of the reasons. He's not the only reason, but he's one of the reasons why the Jets haven't been able to get out of that first round, because he has not been as dynamic in the playoffs as he has been in the regular season. And I love that you brought up the pad pass last night, Ezzy, because that's become a great weapon in the National Hockey League. And the skill players certainly are the ones that you often see executing that. So, and the other part of it too was, how about the little loop-de-loop around the back of the net, come out the left
Beautiful
side.
set play.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it doesn't happen if Gabe Velarde's not taking Jacob Markstrom's eyes away. So, there's all those components that go into that play. I mean, we see the finished product, but there's the setup to it as well. But here is why I think I would offer some optimism for Nikolai Ehlers this year. I think he's been as hard on himself as he ever has been. Is there anybody who is more critical of themselves and also, being part of that conversation to maintain the standard than Nikolai Ehlers? The other night, I think it was in Philadelphia. I thought they had a really, really good first period. So Paul and Mitchell have Nikolai on for the walk-off interview, and they say, Nikolai, would you agree that was an excellent first period? Pause. It was a good first period. But the other part of it too, guys, is, and my major criticism of Nikolai Ehlers in the past has been the tendency to fall into the trap of trying to create plays that are not there, i.e. hope plays. And we have seen that on a very rare occasion this season, but he's been able to pretty much erase that from his repertoire. So those are the plays that are absolute killers in the playoffs. And when I'm talking about the hope play, throw that puck in the middle and hope there's a teammate there to get it. Throw the puck in the middle and hope the defending team isn't there to break it up, rather than making the secure play. And I've seen far more secure plays from Nikolai Ehlers this year, and not at the expense of the greatness that he plays with. So, and I think here's the part that maybe we missed the narrative on a little bit. In talking about the trading deadline from a post-deadline perspective, the Jets were able to get a rental and not have to give up a first-round draft pick.
Right.
And you could say the same thing about Mason Appleton and Alex Iafallo, who are also pending unrestricted free agents. The same thing for Neil Pionk. They've kept all of those guys, and there wasn't a word said about it. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that this is a first-place overall team.
Right.
But I think, too, that the way that Kevin Cheveldayoff operates, that at some point, not all, that you can't re-sign them all, and Cheveldayoff has already made that clear. But I think he's going to re-sign the pieces that he feels that fit the best with the players they're willing to commit to, and also with the players that they see coming up through the ranks eventually.
Kelly, you look at the Jets, let's say bottom six now, and we know that there's depth there. That's where the Jets have their most significant amount of depth among their forward group, is in that bottom of their lineup. Which player in the bottom six, that's a regular, do you think needs to sort of elevate their game over the final 18 games of this regular season? Who do you want to see more from that we've seen sort of flashes at times, but oftentimes they can also disappear a little bit? To me, the answer is Mason Appleton, a guy who oftentimes you don't necessarily notice in the course of a game. Maybe that's a good thing, but still you always feel there might be a little bit more meat on the bone when it comes to his performance on the ice.
Well, here's what I see from Mason Appleton. And I'm going to disagree with you there, Drew, because I think he's been remarkably consistent in what he does. I know that there are third lines that probably provide more offense from their right winger than what the Jets get from Mason Appleton, but he plays a hard game. I always I've got my little notepad there. I'm just not as modern as everybody else with the iPhones or the Don't
worry. You're in good company. Here's my notepad as well.
Yeah, Kelly, we're pen and paper guys too. We're old school.
Perfect. So I always put a little tick mark there whenever Mason Appleton has either been on the receiving end of a hard play or has been the person who's doled out the hard play. How many times do you see him go to the hard places to make things happen that very rarely show up in the statistics? And I think he's been really consistent with his play this year in that regard. But having said that, rather than the idea of of an individual player, I think that the Winnipeg Jets, and I think all three members of that Lowry line would tell you that they would like to be able to maintain that high standard that we saw earlier in the year. And I think there are little dips and valleys in there. This line needs to be the standard bearer for Jets hockey. And so I think they've struggled a little bit with their consistency on that. Now, part of that was Adam Lowry being out of that lineup for 8 games. Nino Niederreiter, he's probably the most offensive presence on that line. And, he is one of those streaky goal scorers. He'll have, 5 or 6 goals in a 10-game span. And right now, he can't buy a goal for love nor money. But, they're all around the net. And so they have to continue to be a real difficult line to play against. They have to be that line that Scott O'Neill and the coaching staff can send out to either calm the waters or to handle the push. They do it most of the time, but I think they could be a little more consistent in that. That's my read on that. I think that the fourth line, whatever the makeup has been, has given the Jets exactly what they've needed this season.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Nino Niederreiter is the guy for me, just because he struggled offensively. I'm looking for him just to contribute a little bit more offensively. I'm a big Niederreiter fan. I think we all are. He's been really impressive since coming over to the Jets. But if I'm able to answer Drew's question as well, Kelly, that would be like who I would be looking at, just to provide just a few more goals. Nobody's expecting Niederreiter to drive the bus offensively. But I just like to see a little bit more, just a little bit more of an offensive spark from him. I just wanted to get away from the Jets for a second while we have you on. I wanted to ask you about the big trade that happened right at the deadline, because I was shocked with what the return was for Brad Marchand. And now you consider that, come the playoffs, the Panthers could have Matthew Tkachuk, Sam Bennett, and Brad Marchand in that lineup. I mean, I think it's pretty intimidating for the other teams in the East. But what did you think of that trade? Because obviously, as you know, in the media business, you're always hoping for the big splashes, right? We weren't sure if Rantanen and Marchand were going to get traded, and they both got traded. I just was a little bit surprised that they didn't get more for him, considering that he's clearly a future Hall of Famer.
Well, and the other part of it too is he is injured, as he
fair enough.
We don't know what the extent of that injury is, and of course, one of those first round picks is conditional on Marchand playing 50% of the playoff games. So, and he is 36 years old. So I think the Bruins did about as well as they could under the circumstances of a 36-year-old player who is injured right now. But boy, I'll tell you, if there's a guy that fits the blueprint for how Paul Maurice wants a hockey club to play, it's Brad Marchand fits that bill. Yeah, and you're right. He's just like Sam Bennett and Matthew Tkachuk. I wonder if there's a team in the playoffs right now that is going to be more annoying to be up against than the Florida Panthers. And so I think he fits the bill for them. I'll tell you what, guys, as I know we're running out of time. For me, the most unique deal yesterday was the Ottawa Senators, trading Josh Norris to Buffalo essentially for Dylan Cousins. Ottawa is on the cusp of maybe ending, what is it, that 8-year playoff drought? A long
time.
They've stuck with that core for a lot of years with the belief that they could eventually get them over the top. And so to make that deal, and knowing how emotional that hockey club is, and they play on a lot of emotion, I mean, led by Tkachuk and Stützle.
Wow. Did you see Brady Tkachuk yesterday? Did you see his media comments?
I did not know.
He was he was choking up.
He was choked up, Kelly. He wasn't tears. Putting a show on.
Yeah, so clearly like Markin when Tyler Bertuzzi got traded then.
That's right. Yeah.
So I wonder, how does Ottawa react that way? We're not going to have to wait too long. But and then of course they picked up a really, I think, the sneaky under the radar deal for Fabian Zetterlund.
San Jose.
Yeah, exactly. Who I really like in the games that I've seen him play the Jets when they played San Jose. But I thought that was perhaps the most interesting trade of the 24 that were made on deadline day.
It was certainly a busy day, a newsy day. The good folks at CJOB covered it all, and then they had a game to broadcast just the same. Look at you guys putting in the hours.
Yeah, always love those days. 2 years ago, at least, as Cactus Jack, bless his soul, would say, and it turned out nice again with a 6-1 loss, or 6-1 win, rather, over New Jersey. Because remember, 2 years ago, when they made the deals for Nemesnikov and Niederreiter, they were playing at Edmonton that night. And what was it? I think it was like 6-1 before they got a couple of late goals in a 6-3 loss. You never know how teams are going to react on trading deadline day. Right. But I think the Jets, an already very, very good hockey club, is going to be just a little bit 5 to 10% better, maybe.
That's been the mantra all season long, is how to find a way to be about 10% better. The Jets have been that way since the start. We'll see if they can continue that way through the rest of the regular season.
They just needed to bring in a good Saskatchewan boy. They need to bring in more of those Western boys, Kelly.
Yeah. You notice a trend there, don't you? Yeah.
Oh, Drew apparently has had a microphone malfunction.
Elvis has left the building.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was expecting Drew to pop in there, and now it appears that I'm the host. So, Drew, you're still not coming in there.
Yeah.
But
hard to do, but
there we go.
I'm back. Kelly, thank you. We'll see everybody tomorrow, 2:00 for the pregame show, then the Jets and the Hurricanes at 4:00, followed by the postgame show. We're looking forward to that. Always appreciate your time, my friend. Great.
Yeah, and just a closing thought on that. I wonder what the emotional level of the Carolina Hurricanes is going to be tomorrow. And you notice Winnipegger Seth Jarvis now elevated to the number 1 line in Carolina to take over from Rantanen on that line with Blake and Aho. So, yeah, definitely looking forward to that game. As always, fellas, thank you for having me on. I always appreciate Saturday mornings talking with the Legal Curve crew.
Thanks, Kelly. Be well.
Thanks,
Have
Kelly.
a great rest of your day. Kelly Moore, 680 CJOB. Great guy, great friend of the program. When we return, hour number 2 of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show will get started. Much more Jets talk. Craig Button still to come this morning. Lots to come. Don't go anywhere. Drew Mindell, Ezra Ginsburg, Saturday morning, brought to you by our friends at Play Now, Manitoba. It is the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
We want to thank you for not betting with Play Now and choosing our illegal gambling site instead.
Because we couldn't afford things like this without your money.
So much of your money.
Now you might have questions like,
do our profits benefit your community?
No.
Or bet with Play Now, Manitoba's local legal and secure gambling site.
Dining, entertainment, parking, and convenience, all in one spot. City Place is located in the heart of downtown Winnipeg, attached to the Canada Life Centre. Whether you're working, living, or out for a night in the downtown, make City Place your go-to destination before or after the fun finds you. Lunchtime, game time, anytime. Visit City Place at 333 St. Mary Avenue, next to Canada Life Centre. Holt Dental, the new official dentist of Illegal Curve, has a philosophy rooted in 2 unyielding principles: genuinely caring about patients and providing outstanding service. Being a patient of Holt Dental means more than just checkups and treatments. It's taking the time to listen and talk to each patient so they can achieve the best long-term health, functionality, and aesthetics for their teeth, mouth, and gums. Conveniently located at Grant Park Festival on Taylor Avenue, Holt Dental is dentistry of the highest quality in a comfortable and relaxed environment. For more information, visit holtdental.ca. Oh, and there's plenty of free parking at the front door, too. Celebrating its 40th year as Winnipeg's home for stand-up comedy, Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club has recently been named Canada's top comedy club and a top 5 comedy club in North America. From birthday parties to date nights to fundraisers and everything in between, Rumors is your destination for the best and most affordable live entertainment Winnipeg has to offer. For more information on upcoming shows, Rumors' incredible promotions, and to purchase tickets, visit rumorscomedyclub.com.
At Boston Pizza, a fast lunch doesn't have to mean fast food. Now you can get a $15 lunch served in just 20 minutes, including your choice of a main, side, and drink. That's right, lunch for $15 at your local Boston Pizza.
We are back Saturday. It's the morning time. Drew Mindell, Ezra Ginsburg, the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. A friendly reminder to everybody that the Illegal Curve postgame show is going to come your way tomorrow, right around 6:30 or so in the afternoon, late evening, early evening, whatever time you want to say. We'll talk about the Jets and the Carolina Hurricanes tomorrow, right around 6:30, 6:45. As you can see on your screen, or for those listening on the podcast, we remind you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, smash the like button and ring the bell to turn on your notifications. That way you'll be informed each and every time we go live here on the Illegal Curve YouTube channel. That means on Saturday mornings with the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. That means after each and every Winnipeg Jets game with the Illegal Curve post-game show. That means next Friday at 12 noon with our special City Place show. And of course, that potentially means, fingers crossed, and all signs point to yes, for the Illegal Curve pregame show before the home playoff games. All these things in the works. Stay tuned for more details, but it's a busy, exciting time ahead for Jets fans and for us at Illegal Curve. So the best way for you to stay informed is to subscribe and ring the bell to turn on your notifications.
This is also exciting. We have now doubled the amount of money in the Illegal Curve bank account because Vicious has hit the super chat for $13.99. For those listening on the podcast, Vicious says, what will happen to our second line when we play Vegas? Could we not have Lowry as our second line center with Iafallo and Ehlers? I mean, we did see it for a few games earlier in the season, right? So it's always a possibility there. I mean, I think, though, that you're going with Nemesnikov up the middle all day long. I mean, I think you might see some tinkering. I don't know. And maybe you see Lowry with Ehlers and Perfetti as your second line. I don't necessarily know that you're going to see Iafallo move from a fourth line role. Like, that would be a lot of, moving around, because then I guess what you're doing is you're having Nemesnikov as your fourth line center. And then if Iafallo is replacing Perfetti, is Perfetti's on your fourth line? I don't know about that. But Lowry has shown in a small sample size he can handle that second line center role.
I think the Jets' deployment is pretty evident after the top line. So we know when Scheifele and Velarde and Connor play and they do their thing. When the Jets need a goal, the Nemesnikov, Ehlers, Perfetti line gets more ice time. When the Jets are defending a lead, which has been more often than not this year, it's Lowry and it's Appleton and it's Niederreiter who get the more ice time. Now, can some of those pieces be mixed and matched depending on who's going on a particular night or who's not going? Absolutely. That's the beauty of having the depth that the Winnipeg Jets do have, that they can mix and match and interchange things and shake things up without really having to, what I would describe as, elevate somebody who's a complete fish out of water. We know the Jets' strength. We know that a lot of these guys can act and succeed in a lot of different roles. That's where the depth of the Winnipeg Jets is an advantage as compared to a lot of the other teams that they're going to be playing. Do the Jets have the most talented, 12 forward group roster? They do not. Dallas has a more talented roster. Colorado now has a more talented roster. A lot of the other teams also have equally, if not more, talented rosters. But as
I would say, though, Drew, I don't think that even with Colorado acquiring Brock Nelson and then obviously Casey Middlestat for Charlie Coyle, to me is a bit of a wash. I don't necessarily know that.
No, but Middlestat hasn't worked in Colorado.
No, he hasn't worked, but I'm saying I don't think Charlie Coyle is this tremendous upgrade over Casey Middlestat. That's all I'm going to say.
I think he's going to fit better than you knew that Middlestat wasn't working. He was there. He was middling.
Yeah, but Drew, look at Charlie Coyle's numbers over his career. He's not a 70-point guy. Like, he's a good player.
Right.
All I'm saying is that Nelson is the big one.
No question.
Nelson's the big move there. But even with those moves, I don't think that the Jets forward depth, like top 12, I'm with you. Dallas, I think, is right now probably arguably number one in the entire league as far as forward depth. Maybe Florida Panthers are up there as well. But I just don't think that they're as far away as some people are suggesting that they are. That's all I'm saying. That's just my opinion.
And that's perfect.
I mean, look at their fourth line. You've got Alex Iafallo, Brandon Tanev, and Morgan Barron, or when he's healthy, Rasmus Kupari on your fourth line, who's a first-round pick. I just think that, if you were to compare line by line, I think when it comes up the middle, that's when the Jets' forward depth is a little thinner than some other teams.
I mean, for the Jets to succeed come playoff time, it's going to require they have to come in waves, because top line versus top line, Connor, Scheifele, and Velarde just aren't as good as Dallas's top line, and they're not as good as Colorado's top line. They're probably not as good as, McDavid. They're not as good as Eichel on Vegas. But we knew that before the trade deadline.
Despite all this, by the way, Drew, the Jets are the top offensive team in the league.
I know. That's what I'm saying.
Right?
It's the waves. It's the Jets throwing wave after wave after wave after wave where they begin to submerge their opposition. It's not strictly on a strength on strength. Our top line is going to be better than your top line, because that's not how the Jets are built. And that's not, Scheifele, Velarde, Connor, we know. A lot of people smarter than yours truly have been running the numbers, and they say that
nobody's smarter than you, Drew. Come on.
I mean, honestly, I'll be humble for a minute and admit that yes, it's true. Somebody could be smarter than me, but Scheifele, Velarde, Connor, they grade out in a vacuum as an average NHL top line. And it's where in the second, third, and fourth lines where the Jets excel, where the Lowry line as a third line is in I think I saw the top 95 percentile of lines. And then the second line has been in the top 90% percentile of second lines. And the fourth line has been also in that 90-95% range in terms of the percentile where they land. So it's the waves that the Jets throw at you that allows them to succeed. Now, my theory, which I've said for a while, is that depth wins you regular season games, but superstars win you playoff games. The Jets' ace in the hole, of course, is that their superstar is Connor Hellebuyck, a guy whose name I don't believe we've even mentioned so far this morning on the show, which is hard to believe, but it just goes to show you how much, what he does is become second nature to all of us, and it's become expected to all of us.
Right.
If the Jets protect the middle of the ice, which they haven't done in the playoffs most recently, especially last year against Colorado, Connor Hellebuyck could be that superstar that puts the Jets over the top.
Right. And it's too simplistic, Drew, to say that it's star players or that it's depth players that win around. Or I mean, it's in a long playoff run, depth players obviously factor in every single year, right? Like whether it's the Florida Panthers winning with a guy like Carter Verhaeghe, or it's the Vegas Golden Knights winning with players like Brett Howden and Keegan Colasar. I mean, Ryan Reeves, when the Vegas Golden Knights, that first run, he scored the winning goal against the Jets, right? So obviously depth is always going to come in, but you're right. I mean, it's the superstar players who tilt the scales one way or another, and the Jets happen to have the best goaltender in the world right now. They also happen to have one of the best defensemen in the world. So that's what I would say that sometimes is overlooked on the Jets, where, yeah, if you're going to compare the Jets' top players to the Avalanche top players, yeah, look, you could do that with any team really in the league. How many players, I should say, are as good as Nathan McKinnon and Cale Makar? Those are two of the top 5 players in the world. Right. So, I mean, obviously it's recency bias. The Avalanche are one of those teams that the Jets know there's a chance they're going to have to go through to get to the West Final and beyond. But you're absolutely right. I mean, the Jets have a lot of strength. Look, they're one of the best offensive teams and one of the best defensive teams in the league for a reason. I mean, this isn't a fluke. The season's almost over here. We're 64 games into the season. It's not like we're talking about 5 or 10 games into the season here. And the Jets have maintained first in the league for the majority of the season, right? So it's not like, we're talking about a flash in the pan here. So I think that with the lineup as it's currently constructed, it could easily go all the way. I mean, that's why hockey is the sport that we love to cover. It's because it's unknown, right? Like, we're going to have to wait to see, who do the Jets match up against? Are there injuries? What type of adjustments are the Jets going to have to make in series? What type of adjustments are the other team going to make?
Can the Jets make those adjustments? Because they haven't been able to make those adjustments, in the last couple of playoff rounds, where they just, they find adversity, which you always do, and the Jets have shrunk in the face of that adversity. And that's going back to our conversation that we just had with Kelly Moore. I think that's why Luke Schenn is going to be a big asset. He's going to be an asset on the ice, but let's be frank, he's a third pairing guy at this stage of his career. what he does in that third pairing is going to be important for the Winnipeg Jets. But on the ice, he's not going to be your knife's edge between winning and losing.
And I would suggest that if there's a deep playoff run, I mean, it's not guaranteed Luke Schen's going to necessarily play every game, right? We talked about that with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Obviously, the Lightning defense, with Hedman and Eric Chernak and Mikhail Sergachev, a little bit deeper than the Jets. But
McDonough still there?
Ryan McDonough back in the Cup years. Yeah, he was there. So, I mean, there's always the chance that, Schenn and Colin Miller, for example, switch spots. And it's possible Schenn plays all the games. I'm just saying, based on his age, based on the fact that the Jets are deep on defense now. And just as an aside, Drew, I know there were, a certain segment of Jets fans that were unhappy, that the Jets didn't get a left shot defenseman. And I'll be honest. I mean, I'm somewhat disappointed because I do think, Logan Stanley has struggled at times this year. I think he's playing better than he was earlier in the season. I'll give him that much.
I'd agree.
But I do think you still have Hayden Fleury there. And again, I don't think, look, Hayden Fleury, to steal a line from Kelly Moore, Hayden Fleury is not Bobby Orr. But I think when Hayden Fleury was paired with Colin Miller, their numbers were good. Their underlying numbers were they weren't blowing anybody out of the water. Right. So, I mean, if your third pair is Hayden Fleury and Luke Schenn, for example, and you're playing 14 or 15 minutes a night, I have no problem with that. We'll wait and see. I mean, the Jets always do have the option. I just wanted to get that in there to have Hayden Fleury there. I think, Ville Heinola is a guy that, speaking of guys we haven't talked about, Drew. Yeah. I mean, he's number 8 on the depth chart now. Even if number 9 on the depth chart for the Jets, right? So it's pretty incredible. That's a conversation maybe for another time, what his future is with the Winnipeg Jets. But obviously, bringing in a guy like Luke Schenn doesn't help.
Winnipeg Jets is what his future is.
I would agree with that. I don't think his long-term future is with the Jets. I think, I'm not going to say he's been a first-round bust, but I definitely don't think that his future is with the Jets. Let's just leave it at that. But I like the moves. And again, I think at the end of the day, we're going to say this was a successful trade deadline if the Jets go deep in the playoffs. If the Jets are knocked out in the first round, then obviously everyone's going to be talking about how the Jets should have got Brock Nelson or how the Jets should have got this guy, Jared McCann or Scott Lawton or whoever. But this is the group. I mean, this is the group that got you this far. Chevy goes out and he acquires a couple veteran players, a guy on the fourth line that can give you some energy and speed, kill some penalties. And then obviously, as we've talked about, Schenn is a guy who blocks shots and gives you a solid 14 or 15 minutes of defensive play. So I think the Jets are setting up nicely. And probably the most important thing that we haven't talked about a lot, aside from Kupari, they're healthy, right? Yeah. Like this Jets team is healthy. Obviously, knock wood. Hopefully that continues the last 18 or so games of the season here. But the way the Jets are currently constructed, I mean, when I'm sure people ask you this, around town, Drew, all the time, like, is this going to be the year? Well, my response is always like, why can't it be the year?
Certainly.
I don't know how many other teams in the Western Conference that really are scaring the Jets right now, aside from maybe Dallas.
Well, the way the Jets have been playing, I mean, they have their MO. They know exactly how they have to play. Now, the Jets haven't really been punched in the face. They haven't been punched in the jaw yet this year. And that's the question, I think, that is going to be the playoff question. Whatever happens between now and the end of the playoffs, look, the Jets basically have to go. If the Jets win half of their remaining games, they're likely going to, without crunching the numbers and doing a deep dive, if the Jets win half of their remaining games, they're going to finish with 110 points. They should win the division. It'll be an upset if they don't win the division, as long as you win half of your remaining games. So that, and then the question becomes, come playoff time, how do they respond to that first time they get punched in the nose? They haven't been punched in the nose the last couple of years. Every time they've been punched in the playoffs, they wilted, they faded, they just dissipated entirely. Are they built different? That's been that's what they would like us to believe. That's why you go out and you get a Luke Schenn to, I think, ensure that your dressing room doesn't panic after you get punched in the nose for the first time. That's where the question begins to arise now for the Winnipeg Jets. To your point, though, as I was looking it up while you were talking there, Colin Miller and Hayden Fleury together, they played 116 minutes so far this year as a pairing. They had a possession numbers of 57.5% and an expected goals of 57%. So
which is good. which
That's
is
great.
very good
For a
That's-
third pairing,
and
that's
and
great.
that's what I'm saying. Like Hayden Fleury gets kind of like
He gets lost in the shuffle a bit.
he gets lost in the shuffle. And I think that's what often happens when the trade deadline every year when the trade deadline comes around. Everybody is looking at those trade bait boards religiously, right? Like we're looking at Daily Faceoff or Sportsnet or The Athletic or TSN, and everybody's focused on the names out there, and we kind of lose track of the macro level looking at these teams. Like, don't forget that this Jets team has been in first place the majority of the season, and specifically Hayden Fleury was a third pairing guy who moved up to the second pair when Dylan Sandberg was injured. And yes, he did struggle. And don't get me wrong. I mean, like you said earlier, Drew, there's a lot of teams that have a Dylan Sandberg, right? Like the Devils losing Dougie Hamilton, I would say is comparable to the Jets losing Dylan Sandberg, or maybe more so Josh Morrissey. But the point is, you could take a top four defenseman off a lot of teams. Look, if the Dallas Stars lose Thomas Harley, that's a big loss. Obviously, Heiskanen is going to be coming back, which is scary. But the point I'm trying to make is, like you said, the underlying numbers for Hayden Fleury and Colin Miller were good. So if Logan Stanley struggles, I think Hayden Fleury and Luke Schenn, those are both veteran defensemen. There's no reason to think, look, Fleury plays a very reliable, solid defensive game. He can skate. I mean, he doesn't make a lot of mistakes. So he's kind of your prototypical, boring, reliable defenseman. So the Jets do have options. If, for example, that's all I'm trying to say. I think a lot of people were really upset that the Jets didn't bring in a left side defenseman, but I'm kind of over it at this point.
Well, I said it last week on the show that to me, the tea leaves were that the Jets were going to go with Logan Stanley on the left side, that they were going to go with Hayden Fleury, and it wasn't as big of a priority as it may have been earlier in the year, or as a lot of fans hoped, that the Jets would address the left side of the defense. I thought I saw the writing a little bit on the wall there. For whatever reason, Scott Arniel is comfortable in going with Logan Stanley. Whether or not that bites the Jets in the behind, time will tell. But for now, it's clear that Logan Stanley and or Hayden Fleury are going to be the drivers on the third pairing left side, and then likely it's Luke Schenn, Colin Miller on the right side moving forward come playoff time. Craig Button is set to join us momentarily, so we'll take an early commercial break and come back and be commercial free from now until the top of the hour. The Illegal Curve Hockey Show, presented by Play Now. It rolls on this Saturday morning. Bottom of the hour, Illegal Curve Hockey Show, Saturday morning. Drew Mandel, Ezra Ginsburg with you. Craig Button set to join us momentarily. We'll bring him in as soon as we see him backstage tomorrow evening, 6:30, 6:40, right around there. The Illegal Curve post-game show following the Jets and the Carolina Hurricanes. And a lot of the talk this week on the show leading up to the trade deadline is about asset management. I think everybody should actually learn about asset management from Carolina Hurricanes forward, former Winnipeg Jets forward, Jack Roslovic. As many people know, Jack Roslovic was wearing number 96 for the Carolina Hurricanes. He gave it up to Mikko Rantanen in exchange for a Rolex, as well as some other goodies, and he only had to give it up for 14 games because this morning at practice for the Carolina Hurricanes, Jack Roslovic is back to wearing number 96.
So he's up a Rolex and has the same number.
He's up a Rolex. He lost the number for 14 games, Rolex and some other bits and pieces. So that is asset management at its finest from Jack Roslovic, former member of the Winnipeg Jets. That information courtesy Walt Ruff on Twitter. He works for the Carolina Hurricanes, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So there you go. There's a little bit of humor in what is probably not the funniest scenario and situation for those in Carolina who are fans of the Hurricanes, the Jets' opponent tomorrow night.
Well, yeah, and there were some, speaking of number changes, there were some Jets fans that were thinking maybe Gabe Vilardi was going to give up 13 because obviously Tanev wears 13, right? But he went with 73. Not a number you see very often. If you were to look at around the NHL, the amount of guys that have worn number 73, there's not a lot. But obviously,
Toffoli wears 73 last year.
Yeah, Toffoli is 73, which is pretty funny.
There you go.
Yeah.
So I mean, you're right. It doesn't seem.
Yeah, not a common number, but just on the Roslovic, he's having a nice year for the Carolina Hurricanes. 19 goals. He's on pace to best his career high of 22 goals scored with the Columbus Blue Jackets. So nice to see the former Winnipeg Jet thriving in Carolina. He's obviously going to get to play in the playoffs as well. But yeah, that's pretty funny that he gave up the Rolex Rantanen, that is, and then he gets traded to the Dallas Stars. What a huge move. Like, obviously, we'll spend more time getting back to the Jets here, but Rantanen to the Dallas Stars. Like, I've said this to you many times before in the last week, Drew, but how many times do you see a top 10 NHL player traded twice in one season? Like, you just don't see it.
I saw a tweet from Sean McIndoe. Down Goes Brown is what is known as a lot online, and with having been traded from Colorado to Carolina to Dallas, as soon as he steps on ice for the Dallas Stars, presumably that'll be, I think they play in Edmonton tonight, if I'm not mistaken, he'll be the player to have been, who's got the most points ever, having been traded twice within the same season. So the previous to him, it was Thomas Vanek. Remember when Vanek went from Montreal and maybe Buffalo and then somewhere else?
Minnesota, maybe?
It wasn't Minnesota. I'm going to look it up while we're talking about it. But he had something like 68 points when he was traded 3 times in one season, or twice in one season. It
was Montreal, the Islanders, and Buffalo.
There you go. That's what it was. Montreal, the Islanders, and Buffalo, and he had 68 points. And Rantanen has already got 70 points this year, so he's going to best that, and he'll go into the.
I don't remember Vanek ever playing for Montreal. Probably because it was for 5 games, but I definitely don't remember that. I mean, he was that year. That was 2013. 2013-14. So that's going back 12 years. But yeah, that was. He had a good career, over 1,000 games, almost 800 points. Vanek, but I still think Rantanen is a step above. This is a guy who had 100 points last year.
Yeah, I mean, he's a superstar player. There's no question. I mean, that's what he's that's what he is in the NHL. So if you're the Carolina Hurricanes, from that perspective, you have to wonder, what was the and we don't know the answer, but I have to wonder, did the ownership, Tom Dundon, go to the general manager and say, you must trade Mikko Rantanen if he's not going to sign a contract here? Because from the Carolina perspective, it doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense otherwise. But we'll talk about that now with our good friend from TSN. Craig Button joins us on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Craig, good morning. Thanks so much for giving us your time. Hardest working man in show business between the trade deadline and the Jets game last night and now us this morning. We appreciate it.
Well, don't forget about the Montreal Canadiens game on Thursday night in Edmonton. I broadcast that game, flew on the red eye to Toronto, did the trade deadline, and then jumped on to do the Jets on Friday night. Hey, it's all in a day's work, they call it, Drew.
And we appreciate you extending that work into Saturday morning to join us. Craig, obviously we've spent the last 90 minutes or so, and last night on our post-game show, talking about the moves the Jets made, where the improvements were on the margins as opposed to being the superstar splashy, acquisitions that we saw in Dallas and that we saw in Colorado. When you look at the Jets' performance last night, and then you factor in what they did at the trade deadline, is this a team that's now sort of maybe even further galvanized by the nobody believes in us mantra that, we heard after the trade deadline, where people were saying the Winnipeg Jets are no longer a favorite because of what they didn't do at the deadline?
Yeah, what's interesting, my first comment is that you're trying to improve your team in different areas, right? Like, I really believe getting Luke Schenn's a really important check mark in one of the important boxes. You have Dylan DeMello and you have Neil Pionk on the right side. They don't have somebody that can back up those guys. Luke Schenn's a really capable, heavy, hard, third pair, right shot defenseman. He's he's hard to play against, and you can filter him through different parts of your blue line. I think that's a really significant addition. Is it sexy? I guess it's not sexy like Rantanen or those players. I get it, but you're trying to improve your team, and I think that was a significant. I really think that's being downplayed. That people don't understand how. I think that's a really important addition. I've been talking about a player like David Savard. He wasn't going to become available. Luke Schenn is not just a nice backup plan. Luke Schenn's everything that David Savard is. So there's nothing, absolutely zero wrong. I guess I got to ask the question to you guys, and you don't have to answer it right now. What was Barry Trotz thinking about? Like, why didn't he just deal directly with the Winnipeg Jets? Anyway, that's left for another day. Now you go Brandon Tanev. Brandon Tanev. The penalty killing is decent. Like he's a catalyst. He's a threat. I think when you start to look at those players that have played deeper in the lineup, and I'm talking about Iafallo, Gustafsson, Kupari, Barron, Tanev. The playoffs are about who can go the hardest, the longest. Tanev's going to help you in that regard. Kupari's out right now. He fills in. So those are my two comments there. I don't think anybody would look at the Winnipeg Jets and say this isn't an excellent team, because they are. They are. Full stop. But you're always trying to look at what you can do to try to strengthen your team a little bit more. And I don't think it's just the second line center. I think just a winger that was a little bit bigger would have been a nice fit. I get it. Like, and people say Kevin Cheveldayoff, well, he's not aggressive. Well, I don't know. Monahan and Toffoli last year, that's not aggressive. And you have to be mindful of where you're at with what the acquisition cost is. Like the minute I saw Cal Ritchie go in the trade for Brock Nelson and the pick, I go, wow, they were asking for Braden Yeager in the same pick. Like that's what it's as clear as could be. What and Kevin evaluates and goes, wait a second. He goes, we got a really good second line center prospect here in Braden Yeager coming. And Brock's gonna, if we can get Brock, he comes for a year and helps us. But there's also, okay, I don't want to. It's one you can be bold, but you can't be stupid. And Kevin's not stupid. So and he's watched his team play so well. No team is perfect. There's no team that's perfect. I get it. On trade deadline day, you start to go, oh, geez, it would have been nice for the Winnipeg Jets to get somebody another player on that second line. That all being said, Winnipeg is going to have a chance to compete for the cup, in my view. Then, they're a rock solid team. They got depth, and somebody asked me, "Well, who would you rather play?" Like I look at the Colorado Avalanche. It's not like their blue line after Makar and Taves is world beaters. Yeah. So it's not. I know that the Dallas Stars got Cody Ceci, and that's a nice thing. But that right side defense for the Dallas Stars aren't world beaters. I mean, Jim Neal had to go. We know how good Rantanen is, but at the same time, and I said this, Winnipeg now just has to zero in on finishing first in the division.
Right.
And then let Colorado and Dallas beat each other up. And then once they take chunks out of there, Winnipeg goes in and takes chunks out of it and gets to the conference final. Let's go.
No, Craig, just stepping away from the Jets for a second. I texted you earlier in the week to come on. Obviously, we're very appreciative every time you come on. But I wanted to ask you, you've obviously been a general manager, and I wanted to ask you, because I don't think there's anybody better to ask about what it's like, and because I'm fascinated by this, and everybody wants to be a fly on the wall of a team. But if you're able to, what's it like to be a GM on trade deadline day? Is it as exhilarating and as stressful as we kind of outsiders think it is?
Yeah, well, first thing I like to try to set up though, what you're doing, and the deadline that's just the timeline. Okay, you can't do anything after this date.
Right.
The work starts long before that, long before that, and the work starts within your own team. Okay, what do we like about our team? Where would we like to upgrade? You're spending time with your coaches, and when you watch your team play, in this case, Kevin Cheveldayoff, you're encouraged. You're excited. So now you're starting to say, what could we benefit from? And you're also asking yourself the question: if we don't do this, is it going to be detrimental to our chances? I mean, there's certain times when you have to absolutely look at improving your team in a certain area, and if you don't, it can be detrimental. So now Kevin will go out and he'll canvass the GMs, what's available, what's really available, and then those conversations continue on, and they narrow down to okay, who's serious? And I mean, Kevin will gauge who's serious, and to make a move with. What are we serious about? And then you just become really directed. I'm not so sure that trade deadline day is as stressful from my own experiences as the days leading up to it, when you're waiting for those next calls to come, when you think you're close and you're not ready, you're not ready to make the move, ready to go, okay, we got a deal here, right? And you're trying to make sure you're not the one left without a chair when the music stops. But I think when you have the experience, and Kevin has lots of experience, is that you know what's real. And one of the things that I think that I've seen it for years. I saw it, and being in front offices, is that you see who has direction and who doesn't. You can see who panics and who doesn't, and you got to really avoid that area. And again, if you say, okay, and I'm just going to use the example. If you say we're zeroed in on Brock Nelson, like. And you understand, can we get him? Can we not get him? What's the price? What you can't now start scrambling. Like that already has to be in place. And maybe there was nobody else that the Winnipeg Jets wanted. And maybe they knew that if there was no need there. So now what you do is you try to complete the other things that haven't been completed. So you're working in parallel paths. I think at the end of it all, like when you're really calm and composed and you have a plan, it's not busy. I've been in situations and seen situations, heard about situations where it just becomes like, what about this? What about that? Let's get this. Let's get that. I had one manager tell me one time he had a scout, and they were in there. They were talking about it. And he started rambling off this and that and that. Finally turned over. He said, "Listen," he goes, "the deadline's in 6 hours." He goes, "If you don't stop talking, we're gonna have the deadline's going to be over." So that type of you can't have that. Then you want to complete the deals. And then that becomes right on. And then, trust me, Scott Arniel saying, we got Luke Schenn, right on, way to go. Like, that's great. That's what we need. Players get excited. Then you make it, like we got Brandon Tanev. It's not like Kevin goes, "Hey, what do you think of Brandon Tanev?" Like, Scott Arniel already knows, like, and he's already framed, how will you use them? Is he a right fit? Are we adding somebody? You don't want to put square pegs in round holes. The other thing you don't want to do is start adding players that the coach doesn't really see. How am I going to use this guy? Because now you're saddling your coach, and you don't want to do that. So you're going to have needs. Well, I shouldn't say needs, wants. Every team has a need. You have wants, but at the same time, you got to just zero in, and then you get to the end of it, and you got to be prepared. You got to be prepared to say yes, and you also have to be prepared to say no. I'm a big believer that being bold is really good, but not at the detriment of what could hurt you, and like in the near short term. Like people say now, like, oh, what a big price the Tampa Bay Lightning paid. They gave up a 27 first round draft pick.
Mm-hmm.
We all know what Yanni Gourde is. We all know what Oliver Bjorkstrand is. And we all know what a first round pick is. But a 27 first round draft pick, I mean, that might help you in 2032. What are you going to do? Invite the first round draft pick to be on the ice when they're retiring Nikita Kucherov's jersey? And the play, I'm not saying this negatively, first round picks, but understanding that when you're talking about Brayden Yager, like that's a big difference between talking about a 2027 first round draft pick. That's a huge difference. And Dallas, same thing. I mean, I don't know what the Carolina Hurricanes are doing. I have no idea. I mean, At some point in time, everybody's going to weigh in. I have no idea what they were doing. But late round draft picks for the Carolina Hurricanes, good luck. If you're planning for the future, they did a really good job. If you're planning for now, it's just terrible moves all the way through because they haven't helped their team. Well, and anyway, I'll just finish. But Colorado knew what they were doing. They're giving up a really good player. They're giving up a really good player in Cal Ritchie. Cal Ritchie and Brayden Yager are very comparable types. Good trade for the New York Islanders. Colorado says, this is what we're going to do.
To that point, though,
I don't disagree. Like, I'm not sitting here saying, oh, my God, Kevin Shedd, why didn't you make that deal? No, there comes a time when you have to be ready to say no.
Right. To that point, Craig, about what that nobody seems to know what the Carolina Hurricanes approach is, and the Jets, of course, are in Carolina. They face the Hurricanes tomorrow afternoon. If you're the players on the ice in Carolina, and somehow you've gone from Marty Necas to Mikko Rantanen to Logan Stankoven, who's a nice player, to 2 future first-round picks that aren't going to help anybody. That's probably a significant, not going to help in the here and now. how do you sell that to the guys in Carolina, a team that is, towards the top of the Eastern Conference?
You're not selling anything. The players are too smart. You're not selling anything. Like they know. Drew, I've said this many times over the years. The players always know, and they always know first. They're looking at their team and they're going, really? Basically they've traded Nate Trash for Stankoven. Like the Carolina Hurricanes are already a small team, and now they just got another small player. Logan Stankoven is a good player. And I like him. I like his potential. I'm not knocking him, right? Brian Murray famously said many years ago, you know what? There's lots of good little players. He goes, but if you have too many good little players on your team, you're just going to be a good little team. And good little teams don't win in this league. They don't win. And the Carolina Hurricanes aren't winning. They're not winning. And they were bold in trying to go after. And then I think they panicked. Oh my God, we better get something for Mikko Rantanen. Okay. Then why did you make the move in the first place? Why did you make the move in the first place? And again, not smart. I've said it publicly. I don't get it. I don't think it was very smart what they did. And to your point, it creates doubt from the dressing room. And when you create doubt from the dressing room in the front office, that is not a good place to be if you're the manager.
Craig, we were talking about this last week, obviously before the Jets acquired Luke Schenn, but we were talking about the idea of having someone who has a Stanley Cup ring, or at the very least Stanley Cup experience. Like how much weight do you personally put on that? And do you think Kevin Cheveldayoff puts on that? Because clearly, Luke Schenn, without the Stanley Cup rings, comes with an amazing career. He's had an amazing career in the NHL. Everybody knows that. But what about the Stanley Cup rings? Because obviously that's not something the Jets had before they acquired him.
So I'm going to ask you a question, Ezra. And so I'm going to ask you, do you like steak?
Love steak.
Okay.
A nice T-bone. Yeah, all day.
There you go. Right. So you like steak, right? Luke Schenn is steak, right? Do you like mushrooms with your steak?
I do like mushrooms. Yes.
The Stanley Cup is the mushrooms to your steak, your nice juicy steak.
I like a medium, Craig, for the record.
It's a beautiful accompaniment. And one of the things that happens, like with players that have won, is that they understand it, and they're able to keep a sense of calm. I tell this story often, and it was told to me by Mike Modano. And one of the greatest leaders I've ever been around, and it was Mike Keane. And Mike Keane works with the Winnipeg Jets and Winnipeg. One of the greatest leaders, phenomenal. We had traded for Mike Keane and Brian Scruden. We were playing San Jose in the playoffs that year, 1998. And, we'd lost Joe Nieuwendyk. We'd won the President's Trophy. We lost Joe Nieuwendyk first game of the playoffs. Mike Modano was superstar. And I think we're up 2-1. It was game 4. I don't remember exactly the details. But Mike said, he goes, it was halfway through the game, we're tied. And he goes, I'm on the bench and I'm feeling anxious and I'm thinking, I got to do more. I got to do more. And he said, Mike Keane just leaned over, put his hand on my arm. He said, just keep doing what you're doing. You don't have to do more. You don't have to don't do less. He goes, we got this. Just remain calm. Just keep doing it. And Mike says, he goes, as a player, and we've lost Joe. He goes, now I think I got to do more. And now I'm worked up, amped up. Mm-hmm. And just that sense of calm, this is what I need. Mike said it just relaxed me unbelievably. He goes, and it helped me in future playoff games. It helped me when we won the Stanley Cup it's calm. So that sense of knowing, and everybody in the room knows that Luke Schenn knows.
Right.
So it just helps. And Luke's not, there's different types of players. Some players with winning experience might be a little quieter, right? Luke's going to have a voice, and Luke's going to have a respected voice, but Luke's not going to trample over everything. He's going to come in and be able to give them that real sense of, and there's a sense of confidence. We got this because he's been there through it. And I think it's valuable. I do think it's valuable. You have to be able to play, and Luke can play.
Craig Button, our guest on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show Saturday morning. Craig, all these teams, or a lot of these teams, they go out and they acquire pieces, and they immediately they become the Stanley Cup favorite. They immediately change their odds because it's only about the betting odds. It's the only thing that matters nowadays.
Yeah, you're right.
But how quickly how quickly does a player necessarily acclimatize to their new situation? It seemed, on paper, everyone says, oh, this is going to be a great fit, no problem, easy peasy. You look at Rantanen. I mean, he was good in Carolina, but it's not to say that he was immediately a huge difference maker in the 13 or so games that he played there. So do we maybe put too much or not enough emphasis on the adjustment period that is required to bring in a new player and for that player to acclimatize to his new situation?
That is a big part of the equation when you're looking to trade for players. Yeah, one of the other things that I'll say about the Colorado Avalanche, Brock Nelson's played for one organization his entire career.
Sure.
One. Ryan Lindgren's played for one organization his entire career. Charlie Coyle's from Boston. He's a Boston guy, thrilled to be in Boston. And Rantanen, we saw how Rantanen talked about, like, he was stunned, he was shocked. Like, because there was no sense of it. It's not the same with Brock Nelson. Maybe Charlie Coyle feels a little bit differently. But they've added a lot of players in the last little while. So now, not only do you have to acclimate to your new team and new style of play and what you're doing, you also have to adjust to the family situation. Okay, where's my family? What am I doing? How am I going to fit in here? What's my role? Like Brock Nelson knows what his role is, but what's my role? Where's my place on the team? That takes time. And sometimes it goes quicker. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer. I'm a believer that you can make moves. I look at Colorado and go, did they make too many moves?
Well, 5 new forwards in their 12.
Right.
I mean, that's turning over half your team.
And I think that's something we're going to have to watch, right? Because there's the other part of this too. Who's displaced?
Sure.
And I'm not talking about the players that left, but who got displaced in their time on ice and their role in playing? Who's this? So you're not just dealing with the new players coming in. You're also, what's my place now?
Right.
And the more players you have to deal with that, the more the coach is involved in, okay, where does it fit and everything, and trying to figure out. And sometimes it's better to have a player depart fully than to have a player displaced in the lineup, because that becomes now a factor to consider.
Kelly, I wanted to ask you, Craig, sorry, we had Kelly Moore of CJOB on earlier, and we were talking
Kelly's a great guy, so you can call me Kelly anytime.
Oh, no. I was going to call you by your name. Yeah, that's true. You can call me whatever you want to, Craig. But, I mean, we were talking about this, and his point was that one of the reasons why he thinks maybe the Jets didn't acquire a 2C, or maybe the reason why they're not going to be hurting as much, is because of the fact that Gabe Vilardi and Cole Perfetti have been healthy and having career years. What do you kind of think about that? Obviously, the Jets were in on Brock Nelson, but how do you think that does that, I guess, ease your worries a little bit about the Jets, knowing that Perfetti and Vilardi have had the seasons that they've had? Obviously, Perfetti had the slump earlier in the year, but he's turned it around. He's playing the best hockey of his young career.
He really is. And one of the things too, that when we talk about the Winnipeg Jets and we talk about, career years and what you're trying to do, right? You're evaluating your players. Gabe Vilardi, Nick Ehlers is having a heck of a season. We know what Vladimir Namestnikov's done. And, one of the things I've tried to be very careful of is, again, displacing Vladimir Namestnikov. So you go get a second line center, right? Where does he go? It's great for me to say that Vladdy can play anywhere in your lineup, but he's had a really important role on the top team in the NHL this year. So how does he feel when you move him out? And then Kevin's considering that, talking to Scott O'Neill and the coaching staff, and they're going, do we really want to disrupt that? So these are all factors that come in. Gabe's been, that top line's outstanding. The third line's outstanding. The bottom players that are playing. Alex Iafallo, when you talk about a true Swiss Army knife, with all due respect to Nino Niederreiter, Alex Iafallo fits that. There's another thing too. Alex Iafallo's embraced where he's at. What you don't want to do is you don't want to have players that have embraced what they're doing. You're asking young players to grow. Last year, Cole got displaced, probably because he needed to be displaced. To displace him this year might be a little bit harder, might be a little bit different in terms of so that factor comes into it. But when you're talking about a top team, and the Jets are a top team, don't get me wrong here, is that you're trying to make sure that they have as much of the reinforcement as they need. And at the same time, you're trying to balance out all these other considerations. Kevin's got massive experience being a player, being in management, and, with Stanley Cup winning teams in Chicago, and now building a really good team here in Winnipeg. Their window's not closing. And, injuries are always going to play a part in anything you do, but their window's not closing. And I think that's another big thing that Kevin knows. It's not closing. Colorado, with the good young players they have, and they have a lot, they're going to run into the same problem that all these other teams have run into. They're going to find themselves really short at the bottom of the league, and that's just part of the progression. The reason the Washington Capitals are where they are right now, they never traded first-round picks and prospects, and they drafted really well. Well, look at what the Winnipeg Jets have done. We all want to intersect with the Stanley Cup. The Jets are in position to intersect with it. Have other teams in their division, Colorado and Dallas, gotten better? Yeah, we know they have. But that's why I think it's imperative. I think the statement last night that the Winnipeg Jets made was emphatic. I think it was a really emphatic win, against a team that's in the playoff spot. And New Jersey came out hard in the first period. And then Winnipeg just put the boots to them, literally, and it just went right after them. I think finishing in first place, I'm going to be in Winnipeg next Friday night for the Dallas game. I think that's going to be a big boy playoff game and everything. And I mean, we know Dallas is good, but finish in first place, then let those. Can you imagine Dallas or Colorado going out in the first round? Well, how do you think they're going to feel? Forget about trade deadlines. Yeah. Think about 12 days into the playoffs and one of those teams is out. That's where I think the incentive is for Winnipeg.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you, Craig. And you mentioned you're going to be in Winnipeg next Friday for the Jets and the Stars, a game everybody's got circled on their calendar now.
So, Drew, who's picking Craig up from the airport?
Which one of us do you need to get a ride from? We'll be glad to do it. If Dan and Kevin are notoriously unreliable, let us know. We'll pick you up. It's no problem.
They'll suggest an Uber for you, Craig. We'll actually pick you up. We'll do you the personal service.
Okay, I don't know how happy you're going to be about this. I come in Thursday night. I think I land at 12:40 a.m. in the morning. So
that's no problem.
Dan just texted me. He said he'll pick you up. But the question I was going to ask, Craig, the Jets have, they got 18 games left. They play tomorrow against Carolina. We saw last year they finished the regular season on that great 8-game winning streak, and then the playoffs came and they quickly melted down and it was done. What is the goal for the Winnipeg Jets? We know finishing atop the Western Conference and the President's Trophy is the goal, but just from your sort of perspective and watching them in the lead up to the playoffs, what do the Jets need to be sort of focusing on over the next 18 games?
Yeah. Well, I think you nailed it. Being top of the division, and obviously, if you're top of the league, you're going to be top of your division. I think that's really important for the Jets here, and I think by adding Luke Schenn and adding Brandon Tanev, that strengthens them for that thing. But they've been a top team without those two guys. I think they're strengthened to go and do exactly that. Number two is that I think for Scott Arniel now, to get a feel for where Brandon Tanev can fit, different situations in the game, different scenarios. We know he's a good penalty killer. That's an area that needs to improve. The penalty killing last year in the playoffs was awful. And we talk about the meltdown. I don't think the Winnipeg Jets could have picked a worse time to play 5 games like they did against Scott. Do I think that's going to happen again? Not at all. I don't think it just happened. I saw it happen to the Calgary Flames versus the Edmonton Oilers back in 2022. It's like where did this come from? Because there was no indication. So giving Scott a chance, getting Luke comfortable playing where he's going to, and it's also comfortable for the players with the other guys. I mean, Brandon's known a little bit more, but for Scott to get and just keep pushing your penalty killing further ahead. It's improved, but keep pushing it ahead. Like I call it sharpening the saw. We know how good the power play is. Even when they lost the 3 games and only scored 4 goals, they just weren't getting the puck across the goal line. They were doing everything right. The goaltenders were a big difference in those games. And when you're doing things right, you're going to get the right results the vast majority of the time. And sharpen the saw. Keep doing the right things. That you don't end up where the Jets are by not doing those right things. Sharpen the saw now in a couple of those areas. Let Scott get comfortable with the new players, and then let's go.
Craig Button from TSN, sharpening the saw that is our brains with his insight and his analysis each and every time he visits us here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. We'll see you Friday night. It ought to be a great tilt between the Jets and the Stars, and we'll get together again real soon, Craig. And if you need that ride, we'll be glad to pick you up on Thursday night. No questions asked.
Well, you know what picks me up? Saturday mornings when I get to join you guys. It really always is a pleasure. So, Ezra, when you said that, I mean, it was an automatic yes this week. It didn't matter. It was an automatic yes.
We appreciate it. We always talk about we're lucky that, I mean, we've been having you on the show for well over 10 years, probably close to 15 years now, but we're always lucky whether we're talking about the Jets or we're talking about the 2025 draft that's not too far away.
Yeah, I'm here for you as you guys.
We are too.
Saturday
it doesn't matter. Midnight,
fans.
1 a.m, 2 a.m, whatever. Craig, one of us will pick you up.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Craig. Have a great rest of your weekend. We'll do it again soon.
Thank you.
Craig Button, the beauty of all beauties here this morning on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. I mean, what more can you say than what Craig brings to the table?
He really is the hardest working man in Canadian sports media. Like,
True.
Craig does so much. He's
generous with his time.
Oh, he's so generous with his time. It's always awesome to have him on.
That's right. After a busy night, where you worked the Thursday, the Habs game, he worked Friday Trade Center, he worked the Jets game last night. He doesn't need to say yes to our audience, but it says what a kind of guy he is, that he says yes and joins us and gives us his time and his insight and all those, all the things he brings to the table. So a true mensch, Craig Button is, if you want to use that term.
He's the hardest button to button.
There you go. That's it for us. What a hell of a Saturday morning broadcast this was. A ton of fun. It's always fun, but this one was especially a lot of fun. And you know what made it great, Ezzy? No Dave. Dave, I thought, is what elevated the show to a whole nother level.
Yeah, no, hey, now you're stealing our line when you're not on the show. I'm not going to bash Dave M. Look, he deserves, we got to give Dave credit, even though he's parts unknown right now. We're not going to mention where he is, but he was banging out content on a little site called thelegalcurve.com. He was updating the site. He was posting the podcast last night after the post-game show. So even though Dave goes on vacation, he still gets his work done.
That's right. He still has his priorities, and that is to make you and I sound good and look good and all that jazz and keep that website humming. Tomorrow night, the Illegal Curve post-game show right around 6:45 p.m. It's going to be yours truly and Connor Harabchuk bringing you the latest on the Jets and the Carolina Hurricanes. We'll give you the night off, and then I think the three of us will be back together on Tuesday night for the Jets and the New York Rangers.
And I wanted to bring up one thing because obviously good friend of the show, Gregory Liverpool, threw this out there. Some people forgot that it's daylight savings time today. So Greg, for those on the podcast, tomorrow is what I meant to say. Yeah. Greg has the comment, don't forget to spring forward and adjust your clocks ahead 1 hour tomorrow, Drew. I just want to make, you have all those grandfather clocks in your house, so I want to make sure that you spring ahead.
I will change the clocks accordingly. Thank you to everybody for that reminder. And thanks to all of you for joining us this morning on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. If you haven't already done so, subscribe to the YouTube channel, smash the like button, and ring the bell to turn on your notifications so that we go live. When we go live, you get notified. That's going to be tomorrow night with the Illegal Curve post-game show, Tuesday night, and then, of course, again, Saturday morning with the Illegal Curve Hockey Show like we do each and every Saturday. Big thank you to the sponsors. They make the show a possibility. That's our friends at Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club. Play Now. They're the title sponsor of the program. Holt Dental, Boston Pizza, City Place, and Seagram's support these fine businesses because of their continued support of Illegal Curve Hockey. We all miss Dave too, Linda. Linda put a comment up saying, great show, but she did miss Dave, and we all did miss Dave. He'll be back next week for another edition of this program.
Is Linda Justin's sister?
I think it is Justin's sister. Yes, you think she might have something better to do, but I think she's Justin's sister. But I guess he's retiring as prime minister or whatever, so maybe he's tuned into the show as well. We don't need to talk politics. I'm not even going there, folks. Don't even start it off. I'm not going there whatsoever. Big thanks to all of you for joining us. Big thanks to everyone for tuning in this Saturday morning. Until the post-game show tomorrow night, we remind you that if it's Saturday, it's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show live on our YouTube channel.
Thanks for listening to this broadcast from Illegal Curve Hockey. For more great Illegal Curve content, subscribe to the Illegal Curve YouTube channel, follow at Illegal Curve on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and visit your online home for hockey in Winnipeg, illegalcurve.com.